A phone call. An ordinary evening. A time when Anna and Sergei's family seemed ready to relax after a long day. The children were already asleep, and the couple enjoyed a quiet moment together, thinking about the day ahead. And then the phone rang. Anna hesitated to answer. It was too late for business calls, but the voice on the other end left no doubt. This call would be anything but ordinary. "Good evening. This is Roman Karpov," said the man, his voice confident, as if he already knew what her response would be. "I think you've heard about my work. I have a proposal for you." Anna froze. Roman Karpov. She had only heard his name in passing. He was a well-known businessman in their region, the owner of several major companies. He embodied success and wealth. But people like her had never crossed paths with people like him. "Sorry, but I don't know what you mean," she began, but her voice trailed off. Roman seemed to anticipate her reaction. "You don't know me personally, but I know you. I know everything about your business, about your children, even about your nightly worries. All you need to do is meet with me." He said it so calmly that his words sounded almost like a command. Anna felt a strange stirring inside. "I'm listening," she barely managed to say. "I want to offer you a deal that could completely change your life," he continued. "I need you to become part of a project. I'm certain that with your help we can achieve something truly big." The call ended as abruptly as if the man already knew she would agree. Anna stepped away from the phone in utter confusion. She looked up at Sergei, who kept his eyes on his papers, not turning around. "That was Roman Karpov," she said, still unsure how to react to this unexpected turn. Sergei only raised an eyebrow. He'd heard of Karpov, but he didn't believe someone of that caliber would come looking for them. Ordinary people living modest lives without excitement. "He said he knows everything about us," Anna continued. "And he wants us to be part of some project. Promises good money, but—" Sergei stayed silent, trying to process what he had heard. It couldn't be that someone like Roman Karpov would personally contact them. It sounded like some sort of game. "He said we need to meet. I don't know what to think, but Sergei, this could be our chance." He looked at her, worry flickering in his eyes, though he didn't show it outwardly. "You think this is real? Why would he choose us? We're just ordinary people," Sergei said, though inside he felt something else. Maybe this was the chance they had dreamed of for so long. Maybe something greater was hidden behind it. Anna sighed and nodded. "Maybe. But if he really knows so much about us, maybe he sees potential in us that we don't even realize ourselves." Anna and Sergei's family seemed ordinary. Their home had no expensive furnishings, and life in their small town held no promise of change. Sergei liked stability. He worked as a manager in a construction company, while Anna worked at a pharmacy. They didn't strive for luxury, but their small home was filled with warmth. The children, Vanya and Lena, were mature for their age. Vanya was into computers and programming, while Lena loved drawing. They were good kids, but nothing suggested they had a big future. Their days were calm and uneventful. But that call, it ended their ordinary life. 2 days later, Roman Karpov came to their house. His black SUV was parked out front, and he himself didn't seem in a hurry. His steps radiated confidence, and his eyes carried a hidden threat, masked beneath a friendly facade. Anna met him at the porch. They exchanged pleasantries, but she felt uneasy at how intently he looked around, as if everything was part of some larger plan. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Roman said, flashing a slight smile at Anna. "I'm sure, like everyone, you dream of something more. Of real success." He spoke to her as an equal, without showing superiority. It wasn't the kind of tone Anna was used to. Everything about him seemed calculated, as though he already knew they would say yes. But what truly shocked her was how much Roman knew. He knew about her past, about how she once dreamed of starting her own business, but never dared. He knew Sergei had wanted to be an architect in his youth, but life had forced him to become a manager. He knew everything about the children, Vanya's programming, Lena's drawing. Roman didn't hide his knowledge. He looked at her as if every step of her life was already under his control. And Anna felt her life would never be the same. "I know you're not like everyone else. You're capable of more," Roman said with a soft smile. "And I want to offer you a project that will change your fate." Roman left, leaving his business card behind. Anna stood at the doorway, still unable to believe what had just happened. Everything was so absurd, so sudden, she couldn't tell what would happen next. But one thing was clear. Their life stood on the edge of enormous change. The only question was, how? 2 days later, Anna and Sergei sat in the living room, trying to make sense of it all. They had never faced anything like this, and the thought of meeting Roman Karpov haunted them. Sergei was wary, his inner voice warning him this could end badly. He increasingly doubted there was such a thing as easy money. What if Roman was manipulating them? What if they were just pawns in his game? But Anna was resolute. The look in her eyes showed she saw this as a chance for change, a better future for the family. She felt this project could bring something significant, something they had always dreamed of, for the children, for themselves, for everyone. "We can't miss this chance," she said firmly, placing Roman's business card on the table before Sergei. "He truly wants to help us." Sergei sighed, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed. He pondered. He knew Anna often believed in the good too easily, and the world was rarely that kind. But now, reflecting on their lives, he realized maybe something bigger was indeed hidden behind this project. A chance to escape the routine, a glimmer of hope for a new beginning. "All right," he finally said. "I trust you, Anna. But let's be careful. We need to learn more before making a final decision." Anna smiled. Her eyes sparkled like someone who had just glimpsed light at the end of a long tunnel. She felt this was their chance, a chance that would not come again. The next day, Roman Karpov visited their home again. He arrived in the same black SUV, his demeanor even more confident. He no longer seemed mysterious or hesitant as he had at first. Now he was at the center of their lives, and it felt like everything revolved around him. Sergei and Anna met him in the living room. He wore a sharp suit, a slight smile playing on his lips, as though every move was calculated. "I'm glad you agreed to meet," Roman said, sitting at the table. "I thought you might hesitate, but I knew you'd make the right decision." He smiled, but the smile seemed empty, as if concealing something deeper. Anna noticed how his eyes swept across the room, as though he were evaluating what belonged to him already and what did not. "I didn't come just to offer you money," Roman continued. "I want you to be part of something bigger, to understand how little it takes to change your life. And for that, I need you." Sergei felt his mistrust growing. Why them? Why this family with no experience in such projects? But Anna's hopeful eyes stayed locked on Roman. Roman placed a contract in front of them. It was short and precise, without unnecessary detail. A few key points. They were promised a share in the business, 10% of the profits. In return, they had to cooperate in the project, though Roman disclosed no specifics. "I'm sure you'll accept this offer," Roman said. "We'll start small, but I'm certain that within months you'll be grateful for trusting me." Anna picked up the contract and read it carefully. With each minute, she grew more convinced this was their chance. She imagined changing the children's lives, improving their finances, finally affording travel and opportunities for growth. Everything she had dreamed of seemed to be in this contract. But Sergei couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. His eyes stayed fixed on the contract, but his thoughts drifted. What if Roman was using them? What if the project destroyed everything they had built? Yet Anna was so convinced. She believed this was the moment they had been waiting for. Don't you see this is our chance, Sergei? She asked, lifting her eyes from the document. We can't let it slip away. This project can give us everything we ever wanted. He clenched his jaw and stayed silent. Roman sat across from them, waiting, his face calm, almost emotionless, as if this meeting were just routine. We can't stay stuck in this rut forever, right? Anna pressed on, her voice growing more confident. This man has given us a chance. Sergei sighed, casting one last look at Roman. He couldn't resist the pull in the air. Anna had already made her choice. He couldn't stop her. All right, Sergei said. We agree. But if something goes wrong, we won't stay silent. Roman pulled out a pen and handed over the contract. It all happened quickly. He smiled, and Anna, without hesitation, signed her name. Then Sergei signed as well. When he handed the papers back, Roman stood and shook both their hands. Excellent, he said, rising. This is the beginning that will bring us all success. You won't regret it. When Roman left, the silence in the room grew even deeper. Anna felt she had made the right choice, but Sergei was left with doubts. He knew they had just signed a deal with a man whose true intentions remained unclear. Everything will be fine, Anna said with a smile. You'll see. But inside, Sergei felt dragged down. He still didn't know what lurked behind this project, and all he could do was watch. Day by day, Roman's project seeped deeper into their lives. At first, Anna and Sergei thought it was just the start of a new stage, a chance to improve life. But the longer they stayed involved, the more they sensed that behind the surface lay something else. Roman remained an enigma. At meetings, he never revealed full details of his business, always promising clarity later. He never said exactly what their role would be, only hinting that it was key. They trusted him because he was successful and confident, but his manner unsettled them. A few weeks later, when the first payments arrived, and the family felt some improvement, strange things began. Roman continued to communicate through calls and emails, but soon events occurred that Anna couldn't ignore. One day, she received a strange call from an unknown number. When she answered, there was only a dial tone, then silence. She tried to call back, but the number was unavailable. She thought it was a mistake, but soon stranger things followed. A few days later, her colleague from the pharmacy called. She said someone had come by asking questions about the family. Not about Anna, but about Sergei, about their business and current situation. The woman introduced herself as Svetlana, claiming to be Roman's partner. But her questions were too personal. That alarmed Anna. Anna couldn't believe Roman would be so crude as to hire people to gather their personal data. But what if it was all part of his strategy? And what if he really was watching their every move? A few days after the call, while going through the mail, Sergei discovered strange documents that Roman had sent to their address. All of them were printed on unusual paper, stamped with a seal he had never seen before. These documents had nothing to do with the business they had agreed upon. They concerned projects that mentioned names of people they didn't know. And Roman's odd surname, Karpov, wasn't listed in these materials. Instead, there was another surname he couldn't make out. Sergei looked over the documents again and, exhaling nervously, realized something was clearly wrong. He was certain Roman had never mentioned these people or projects when they signed the contract. It made him feel that their involvement in this business wasn't just questionable, it was dangerous. When Anna learned about the strange documents, her trust in Roman began to waver. At first, she tried to write it off as a mistake, but she increasingly sensed something was being hidden from her. She called Roman, trying to get an explanation. I received some strange documents, Roman, she said when he answered. Could you explain what they are? At first, silence. Then a deep sigh, and his voice returned, as calm as ever. Anna, Roman said, everything is under control. You shouldn't worry about the documents. I told you we work with partners who sometimes prefer to remain incognito. Anna felt her hand begin to tremble. She couldn't understand why he was lying so confidently. Or perhaps there was something important she didn't yet know. Roman, I don't understand. All this looks suspicious. You said we'd be part of a major business, and now all these covert deals. Don't worry, Anna, he went on, but his tone was less friendly now. You don't need to be aware of every detail. That's not for you. You just play your part, and all you need to do is believe what I tell you. I always support my partners, you know that. But there was something different in his voice. Roman always spoke with such certainty that Anna began to doubt her own instincts. She felt her trust in him starting to shake. After that conversation, Anna decided to act. She could no longer turn a blind eye to all these oddities. She began covertly watching Roman and his affairs. She tried to find out who his real partners were and what he was actually hiding. One of her first steps was to check the company Roman had been dealing with, the one they had entrusted with their money. Anna contacted a lawyer to review every legal aspect of the contract and to find out who stood behind the company. The answer she received was shocking. It turned out the company had been registered only a couple of months earlier, and its legal foundation was extremely shaky. It was like a cold shower. All of Roman's supposed transparency began to crumble like a house of cards. He was not who he seemed to be. Everything he said was merely part of a calculated game he was playing to win their trust and draw them into his shadowy dealings. When Anna was about to share her findings with Sergei, she discovered he already knew more than she'd assumed. He came home with documents he had found himself in one of the old drawers. These were papers connected to people they didn't know. It was an archive from which Roman had recently torn out a portion of the data. When Anna asked him what those materials were, he replied that he too had begun to suspect Roman and had decided to dig into his past. It was an important discovery. They both realized that Roman wasn't just hiding the truth, he was manipulating them, exploiting their weaknesses and desires. And now, as the truth began to surface, Anna and Sergei understood their lives had been caught in a trap built by a man who had seemed like a friend. But what now? How could they get out of it? Roman appeared on their doorstep again. This time his visit was no accident. He stood there with a cold smile, as if he knew his secret was nearly exposed. Anna, Sergei, he said, his voice cold and calculated. The time you spent investigating was useless. You can't get away from me now. You've become part of the game, and now you have to follow its rules. Anna and Sergei felt the ground give way beneath their feet. That evening, as Roman stood on their threshold with a cold smile on his face, the family finally realized the full gravity of the situation. It seemed they had made a mistake by entrusting their lives to a man who wasn't who he claimed to be. Roman stood like a victor, confident they would never escape his web. Anna and Sergei exchanged glances. In their eyes there was not only astonishment, but fear. They didn't know how to fight this man who knew their weaknesses and could manipulate them at every step. "Do you think we'll just give up, Roman?" Sergei asked, trying to keep calm. He was ready to resist, but he didn't know how. Roman didn't answer right away. He merely smirked slightly, as if savoring their reaction. His words were calm, but carried a hidden threat. "You won't be able to avoid this. This isn't just business. It's something more. You're already involved in the game, and now getting out will be impossible." Sergei clenched his fists, trying to hold back the growing tension in his chest. He realized their world would never be the same. But he also knew this: if they gave in, it would be the end for the whole family. "We can't just back down," he said, turning to Anna. She was shaken, but there was no fear in her eyes. She still hoped there was a way out. Roman spoke again, but now his tone was harsher, his eyes darkened with strain. "You don't understand what I can do to you," he said, his voice more insistent. "Everything you think about yourselves and your future can be erased in an instant. Remember who gave you this chance. Everything you have now is my generosity." Anna felt her heart race. She had always believed they would have a chance, that Roman was the man who would give them everything they'd dreamed of. But now she realized something far more dangerous was behind it all. Roman wasn't just a businessman. He was someone who manipulated their lives, using their trust as a tool for his own ends. "Are you threatening us?" Sergei asked, trying to conceal his anger. He knew they had to act before it was too late. Roman smirked again and stepped closer. In the dim light of the entryway, his figure seemed menacing. "I'm not threatening you, Sergei. I'm simply reminding you that you're already tied to this world. And when people like me decide someone is no longer needed, they disappear. And you know that perfectly well." When Roman left, the silence in the house was deafening. Anna sat on the couch, feeling her hands start to shake. She couldn't believe things had gone this far. She had thought it was just a temporary misunderstanding. But now that Roman had said outright they couldn't get out, she realized something much larger was at play. Without a word, Sergei went to the study. He decided he had to understand exactly what Roman was hiding. He began searching for information about the man they were entangled with. He knew Roman was too confident and too skilled at manipulation for his behavior to be accidental. He reviewed all the documents they had signed, and what he found made his heart stop. Some of these documents had no legal force. They were forged. They were signed by people who had never existed. The contract was a dud, a trap. After this discovery, Sergei came to a shocking conclusion. Roman wasn't just manipulating them. He was manufacturing the illusion of their success, making them dependent on his business in order to control their lives. Roman had long been connected to dangerous people. It might have involved illegal activities, though Sergei had no proof. All he could do was try to escape the snare. When Anna learned about the forged documents, her first words were, "How could we be so naive? Why didn't we see this earlier?" Sergei sat in the chair, unsure what to say. He felt guilty for not uncovering the whole truth sooner. But now they were trapped. The only thing left was to try to break free. "We have to do something," he said, rising from the chair. "We can't afford to sit on our hands. We need to find a way to get rid of Roman before it's too late." Sergei and Anna decided they could no longer rely on outside forces. They began gathering every piece of evidence they could to start pushing back against Roman. They started looking for a way out of his game. But every step they took was traceable, and Roman had no intention of sitting idle. Within a few days, they received threats. These were anonymous letters warning that if they tried to uncover the truth about Roman, the consequences would be terrible. The letters were written in a professional hand, with no direct identifiers, yet everything about them said their moves were being watched. Anna and Sergei realized they were no longer just in the game. They had become part of it. And to escape, they would have to act as fast as possible. They decided not to go down the usual path. Instead of trusting outside help, they began to look for their own ways. But whatever plan they devised, Roman was always one step ahead. He knew they would try to run and had prepared several traps in advance to catch them. Sergei felt they could trust only each other. This was their last chance. He and Anna had to figure out what to do next, but time seemed to be running out. Just as Anna and Sergei began packing their things for an emergency departure, the door opened again. Roman stood on the threshold. This time he wore no smile, only a cold gaze and a confident stride. "Were you trying to run?" His voice was deep, as if he knew they had already made their choice. Feeling his heartbeat quicken, Sergei knew there would be no room for mistakes in this game anymore. Roman was already too close. When Roman left, his threat still hanging in the air, the family was plunged into deep anxiety. Sergei and Anna stood in the shadow of the words Roman had spoken. They couldn't believe they had ended up in such a situation, too far in to turn back. They were trapped in a snare he had set for them. Sergei quietly walked to the window, looking out over the city below. He couldn't find a single way to get rid of Roman. Everything they had gathered over these weeks seemed trivial compared to what he could do. Every step they took was under his control. "We have to take action," Sergei said, turning to Anna, though his voice was filled with doubt. He felt his hands tremble and anger flare inside him. It wasn't that he was ready to surrender. On the contrary, he sensed that everything now depended on their actions. But what could they do? Roman began to act even more assertively. The following weeks turned gray. Every morning began with checks of their bank accounts. Every letter and call was scanned for hidden threats. And still, Roman stayed a step ahead. The money the family had received from the project now seemed like nothing more than hush money. The contract they had signed at the start had become not just a document, but a real chain that bound them. With each passing day, Roman sent more people to watch them, making them feel they no longer had any personal freedom. Victor, the same intermediary who had appeared at their house, became a constant presence. He was always nearby, at offices, on the streets, watching their every move. One day, Victor came to the house with an important business proposal. But Anna and Sergei no longer believed in his good intentions. Every time he showed up, they felt the pressure mounting, as if Roman were right there even when he wasn't. "We'll discuss everything," Victor said, his face serious. "Roman expects a new step from you. He said you need to expand your participation in the project." Anna felt her stomach knot with anxiety. She thought Roman was just toying with them, piling on more tasks and increasing the burden to force them to work for him. "What tasks?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Don't worry," Victor replied with a smirk. "It'll be easier than you think. Just do what you're told and you'll get your money. Everything will be fine." Anna and Sergei began to feel the illusion of control slipping from their hands. What had seemed like a chance at the start had become a routine in which they could no longer see a way out. Roman and his people grew more insistent, and every time they tried to find a solution, they ran into obstacles. They could no longer return to their ordinary life. Only one option remained: to see it through to the end, trying not to get caught in an even more tangled web that Roman kept pulling them into. Sergei realized they could no longer be mere partners in this project. They had become part of a dark scheme, and perhaps the only way out was to end it all. At one point, as Anna was once again going through the papers, she found something important. In one of Roman's contracts, there was information indicating that the project they were involved in was, in fact, illegal. The family business they had been developing was just a cover for even more dangerous deals. Anna felt her inner world collapse. She couldn't believe they had become part of this dark story themselves. Their life had become a game, and they were pawns in someone else's match. "We have to act," she told Sergei when he came home. "We can't wait any longer. We need to find a way to get out of this game." But Sergei understood that if they kept searching for a solution, they risked losing everything. They could no longer rely on the forces that once seemed dependable. The family made a decision. They could no longer remain in Roman's shadow. They had to confront him openly. But how? Trusting only his instincts, Sergei decided to act covertly. He would speak with people involved in the project, find out who else might be implicated. Anna chose to use her contacts to get information about the legality of all these dealings. She tried to find leads that could prove Roman was breaking the law. Yet every step they took led to new discoveries, and with each passing day, it became clearer that Roman wouldn't leave them alone. So Anna and Sergei decided to take a step they had long postponed. They began looking for a way to flee. They started preparing for the possibility that they could lose everything: home, money, freedom. But if they didn't act now, there would be no second chance. Sergei found an old secure channel that could help them pull all the information on the project, but the risk was enormous. Mustering her courage, Anna resolved to act decisively, understanding that they couldn't go on living under Roman's control. But just as they were ready to make their decisive move, Victor came to their house again. He stood on the threshold with a cold look and a smile that made their hearts beat faster. "I came to remind you that you can't leave," Victor said, stepping into the house and placing a folder of documents before him. His voice was calm, but carried a hidden threat. "You've already made your choice." Standing beside Anna, Sergei eyed Victor with suspicion. Not long ago, he had been sure they could find a way out, but now everything was becoming far more complicated. Victor, we know you're not here just to help, Sergei said, trying to keep his composure. You work for Roman, and we no longer believe in his project. Victor lifted his eyes but didn't answer immediately. He pulled off his gloves and quietly walked to the table where the folder lay. If I were you, I'd think again, he said, running his hand over the folder as if pondering something important. Because this whole game isn't what you imagine. At that moment, Anna felt her heart pounding. She had long suspected that Roman and his project concealed something far more dangerous than business alone. But Victor never spoke of it directly. He always tried to steer their thoughts away from the essence. Now, seeing his reaction, she understood. Everything was much more serious. You know we can't just go on, she said, clenching her hands. You also understand we're on the edge. If you truly want to help us, tell us what's going on. Why does Roman keep manipulating us? What kind of project is he hiding? Victor steadied his gaze and finally looked at Anna. This isn't just business, he said, lowering his head. It's part of a much bigger plan. Roman has long been working with people who have connections not only in business but in other spheres as well. Those connections give him power. You didn't just become part of a commercial project. This is a project that involves much bigger players. Anna and Sergei exchanged a quick glance. What they had just heard shocked them. Their lives changed in an instant. You mean we were pawns from the very beginning? Sergei asked, unable to hide his anger. He couldn't believe his ears. Exactly, Victor replied, without lifting his eyes from the documents. You didn't realize you were already part of a massive scheme. Roman is using you as tools for his purposes, and now that you've entered the game, there's no way out. Anna felt her knees give way. Everything she had believed seemed so far from reality. She had hoped this project would help them improve their lives, but now everything was clear. They had become part of something far more dangerous and dark. But we can get out, she said, trying to stay calm. Can you help us, Victor? Victor silently shook his head. You need to understand one thing. If you want out, you'll have to move fast. Roman isn't the man you thought he was anymore. And the people who work with him aren't just businessmen. These are people you can't play games with. Victor opened the folder and laid out several photographs and documents. One photo showed Roman in the company of people Anna and Sergei didn't recognize. Another showed them standing beside high-profile figures whose names they had seen in newspapers. One of them was tied to the underworld, another to international affairs. These were people capable of manipulating entire countries. Are you serious? Sergei asked as he glanced at the photos. These people aren't just businessmen. They're the ones who run entire states. Exactly, Victor confirmed. And Roman is in their hands. He's part of that world, and now you are too. You can't just walk away no matter how much you want to. These people don't tolerate betrayal. Stunned, Sergei and Anna stood before Victor. Their lives had been turned upside down. What once seemed possible was now impossible. They couldn't just leave the project. With every step they took, Roman and his allies drew closer. Victor closed the folder and looked at them gravely. You have two paths. Either you keep playing by his rules, or you try to leave the game. Just remember that every step you take will be watched. Anna felt her mind start to race. She knew they had to make a decision right now. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how they fought, they sensed they were already too deep in this game to simply retreat. I can't allow this, Anna said, her eyes filling with resolve. We won't let ourselves be used. We will not be part of that world. Sergei was ready too. He understood the choice would be hard, but he felt their time had come. They had to act. We'll start by dismantling his network. We'll expose him, Sergei said. Victor nodded silently, as if he had known this was how it would be. All right, he said. If you truly decide to go down this path, I'll help you. But remember, you'll need to be prepared. Everything will be on a knife's edge. When Victor left, Anna and Sergei stood there feeling the weight of their decision. They knew this could be the end of their life as they knew it. They were ready to take a step that would lead either to victory or to complete ruin. All they knew for sure was that with each passing day, they were becoming more entangled in a dangerous game, and their chances of survival were dwindling with every step. Several days passed after Victor told them the whole truth, and despite fear and doubt, Anna and Sergei began their preparations. They knew it was too late to run, which meant they had to fight the very system they had become part of. Roman and his shadowy partners continued watching their every move, but now, knowing the truth, Anna and Sergei could act differently. "We can't wait any longer," Sergei said as they sat at dinner, trying to craft a strategy. "We need to gather information before Roman and his people realize we're preparing something serious against them." Anna nodded, her eyes full of determination. She still couldn't believe they had ended up in such a situation, but now the only way out was to expose Roman and his allies. All they needed were the proofs that could bring down his empire. "We start by obtaining information," Anna said, feeling her heart beat faster with urgency. "If we show Roman his cards no longer work, he'll lose control. After that, we act on our terms." Sergei and Anna began to develop a plan. They would use their last remaining contacts, check every resource they could. They knew it was dangerous, but if they didn't act now, it would be too late. Every step was now carefully calculated. Sergei began meeting with former employees of Roman's, using his knowledge to extract any scraps of intel. He knew it was risky, but they had no other options. Anna, for her part, worked with lawyers and attorneys, trying to find loopholes in the documents and contracts they had signed with Roman. She understood their only chance of winning might be on legal grounds. Everything they did was aimed at uncovering what truly lay behind the project they had been dragged into. But each day, their efforts became more perilous. Roman and his people began to sense their chains were loosening. A reaction was inevitable. One night, while Anna was working on the papers at the office, her phone suddenly buzzed. She looked at the screen and saw a message from Sergei. It was short, but its content seized her attention at once. "They know. Victor came. He's tracking us." Anna's heart clenched. She grabbed her bag and rushed to Sergei's room. When she opened the door, he stood by the window, his face tense. "What happened?" she asked, her voice full of alarm. Sergei turned to her and whispered, "He knows we're up to something. Victor was at the office, and I'm sure he's watching us." Anna felt her chest tighten. They couldn't afford a mistake. They couldn't waste time. Victor was already close, and if they didn't act, it could end in disaster. All that remained was to stay in the shadows and keep working on their plan without attracting attention. Sergei and Anna had to be careful not to give themselves away, but every step was under surveillance, and they couldn't allow a single misstep. They decided that in the coming days, they would meet with Victor and try to extract more information from him. Anna carefully prepared questions to test his reactions. Sergei, in turn, planned several meetings with people who could help them gather information about Roman's actions and those of his partners. But despite all their caution, they knew their time was running out. Days dragged on, and each step they took grew more dangerous. Victor appeared around them more and more often, watched their moves, and made it clear they could no longer back out. He even began to hint that if they kept looking for ways to leave the game, they would find themselves in a much worse situation than they were in now. "You think you can just walk away?" Victor said when he met with Anna and Sergei one day. He stood there as always, with a cold smile on his face. "You know that if you try to run, your life will change forever. Roman does not forgive such mistakes." Anna didn't answer, but her gaze was firm. She knew they couldn't surrender. If Roman and his people truly believed they could destroy her and Sergei, they were wrong. When Victor left, Sergei and Anna gathered at the table again, discussing their next move. This time, they were ready for any turn of events. They knew they couldn't act as before. Every move would be tracked. "We can't afford to make a mistake," Sergei said, his voice steady with resolve. "If we're not careful, they'll destroy us. But if we make the right move, we can pull this off." Anna looked at him and nodded. She knew that even greater trials lay ahead, but she also knew they couldn't stop. Roman and his people could not be allowed to run their lives. She and Sergei had to take back control of their fate. The next day, when Anna returned home after meeting with the lawyers, she found her office had been broken into. All the documents they had gathered were gone. All that remained was an empty space on the desk. She understood at once that Roman had learned they had started to act, and now they were targets for his people. Sergei came up to her, his face expressionless. "It's the end. We need to act fast. We can't waste any more time." Anna knew their chances of success were shrinking, but now they had no choice left. They had to find a way to take revenge on Roman before he destroyed them. Every day after their office had been broken into felt long and filled with fear. Anna and Sergei understood that Roman and his people now definitely knew what they were preparing. All the traces they had left had been erased, but even so, the family wasn't going to give up. Now they acted with doubled determination. "We can't keep hiding our intentions," Sergei said, sitting at the table in the empty office. He looked tired, but his gaze was firm. "We need to go into open conflict. It's the only way to win. If we don't settle this now, we'll lose everything." Anna nodded. Inside her grew not only anxiety but also anger. Anger that their life had been used as a toy in someone else's hands. But now that they understood how deep it all went, they couldn't allow themselves to stop. "We have to act smart," she said. "If we're not careful, Roman and his people can destroy us. But if we make our move right, if we catch them making a mistake, we'll have a chance." That evening, when they decided to begin, they carefully planned their actions. Sergei and Anna knew that without reliable allies, they wouldn't break free. They began reaching out to people who might help expose Roman and his network. First of all, Anna met with a lawyer she trusted and discussed all possible legal maneuvers. This step was risky, because if Roman found out they were trying to use legal loopholes, they would be in even greater danger. Meanwhile, Sergei contacted former colleagues who had once worked for Roman, trying to pull information about his business operations. He knew some of them had been involved in illegal dealings out of fear or ambition, but now they needed to cooperate if they wanted to survive. "We have to get to the people who run all of this," Sergei said when they met late in the evening. "If we get their names, if we catch them in serious violations, we can tear it all apart." Anna understood that this wasn't just a fight for their freedom, but also a chance to win the game itself. If they could expose Roman, his influence would be broken, and they could escape alive. Less than a week passed before Victor showed up again. This time he was more wary than before. He said nothing, but his face betrayed concern. He understood that Sergei and Anna were plotting something, and he became more cautious, but that gave them their chance. Victor didn't know what lay behind it all. When he entered the house, Anna and Sergei sat across from him, ready for the decisive conversation. "Victor," Anna began, her voice steady but firm, "you have to help us. You know what we're trying to do. You know how tangled we've become in this. But if we act together, we can bring Roman into the open." Victor looked at them with some doubt. He sensed their attitude had changed, and they were no longer the same people he once knew. He clearly wasn't ready to trust them, but he also knew this was the last chance to avoid disaster. "You want me to help you fight Roman?" he asked with a smirk. "Do you understand what that means?" "We do," Sergei said, locking his eyes on him. "We know what we're getting into, but if you want this to end, you'll have to help." Victor was silent for a few seconds. He wasn't a fool. He knew Roman wasn't just a businessman, but a man who could destroy anyone in his way. But he also knew his own life was now on the line, and if he didn't help Anna and Sergei, he risked losing everything. "All right," he said at last, with a heavy sigh. "I'll help. But remember, I can't stand openly on your side. I have to work from the shadows." Once Victor agreed to help, they began preparing for the final step. Their plan was simple. They had to gather evidence proving that Roman and his partners were engaged in illegal activity. They decided to use their old contacts and infiltrate the very heart of his business. Sergei and Anna set to work. At the same time, Victor passed them the necessary documents and contacted a few people who could help them obtain information. A few days later, they began collecting enough evidence to confront Roman. At some point, they realized they were ready for the next step. But then the unexpected happened. Roman decided it was time to act. One evening, Victor returned to the house, but this time he didn't wear the calm look he usually had. His face was pale, and he seemed shaken. "Roman knows," Victor said, barely keeping his voice steady. "He found out about your plan. He's already prepared everything for the next move." Anna and Sergei felt the blood drain from their faces. Everything they had been doing might collapse into catastrophe. They were ready for anything. But what could they do when Roman was already one step ahead? "What do we do?" Anna asked, unable to hide her fear. "We have to move faster," Victor said. "If we don't take the step right now, Roman can destroy all your evidence. He's already in motion." The night was dark, and only rare streetlights lit the narrow alleys of the city. Anna and Sergei sat in their small apartment, going through the last documents and photos they had gathered with Victor and their secret allies. In their hands, they held proof of Roman's illegal activities, from forged contracts to financial manipulations capable of shattering the billionaire's empire. "It's all ready," Anna said, her voice trembling but filled with determination. "If we send this to the journalists and the police, Roman won't be able to walk away clean." Sergei nodded, his eyes fixed on the monitor. "Tonight it ends," he said quietly. "Either we win, or it's the end of us." They both understood there was no room for mistakes anymore. Any wrong move could cost them their freedom, or even their lives. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Anna tensed, her heart skipping a beat. "Who could it be at this hour?" she whispered. Sergei carefully approached the door and looked through the peephole. Victor stood on the threshold. His face was tense, his eyes full of worry. "They know about your actions," he said without greeting. "Roman sent people. They're on their way here." Anna's heart clenched. There was no place to hide in the apartment, and almost no time to think. "We have to act now," she said. "There's no turning back." Victor nodded and handed them a flash drive. "This is the final piece of the puzzle. It has everything you need to expose him completely." Anna and Sergei looked at each other. They knew it was now or never. Roman didn't take long to arrive. Soon heavy footsteps sounded at the door. He entered the apartment himself, without guards, his face lit by an icy smile. "So you decided to play against me?" he said, staring directly at them. "Interesting. But you know this isn't just a game." Anna rose from her chair, holding the flash drive in her hand. "We know everything, Roman. Your schemes, your setups, your threats. And now all of it will become public." Roman laughed, but his eyes betrayed surprise. "You really think that little flash drive will destroy everything I've built?" he said. Sergei stepped forward. "Don't overestimate your power, Roman. Your time of control is over." Anna inserted the flash drive into the laptop and connected it to the internet. Soon, emails and cloud services began distributing the information to journalists and law enforcement agencies. Roman felt the ground slip from beneath him. His phone rang, calls from lawyers, banks, and partners. Rumors of an investigation were already spreading. He tried to regain control, but it was too late. "No," he whispered, realizing everything was collapsing. Anna and Sergei stared at him firmly. They knew this was the moment when power shifted. Everything you built on fear and lies, Anna said softly but clearly, is falling apart. And now your game is over. After the information became public, the next day journalists and police arrived at the house. Roman tried to resist, but now he had nowhere to run. His subordinates scattered, and his friends and partners turned their backs on him. Anna and Sergei stepped outside, feeling lightness return to their lives for the first time in a long while. They had managed to win, not with force, but with intelligence, strategy, and determination. "We did it," Sergei said, embracing Anna. "Yes," she replied with a smile. "And now we're free." Weeks passed. Anna and Sergei returned to their ordinary life, but they would never be the same. They had learned that in a world where money and power can destroy everything, the most valuable things are trust, honesty, and the courage to act. And though their journey had been filled with danger, they had endured it together. Their family remained whole, and the lessons they had learned became a strong foundation for the future. In the end, sometimes to win, you must risk everything and act when it seems there is no way out. Anna glanced out the window and noticed a shadow flicker on the street nearby. A faint wave of unease passed over her. Someone was watching. "It seems this isn't over yet," she whispered. Sergei touched her hand. "It doesn't matter. Now we know we can handle anything." And with that knowledge, they stepped into a new day, free, strong, and ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.